Hello students. First I want to wish you good luck on your upcoming exam covering chapters 1 through 3. For chapter 3, I thought I would review one of the problems for you that might help you in your preparations for the exam. So the problem I'm going to review is problem number 54B, which is on page 170 in your textbook. So I will pull that up now and you can be getting your textbook out as well. So problem 354B, page 170. What would be best is if you would pause your screen right now, pause the video, and go ahead and read through this problem. It's going to cover most of the learning objectives for this chapter. Learning objectives 2, 3, 4, and 6 are covered. So go ahead and pause this video and read through all of the objectives and all of the requirements, which there are, looks like there's 5 of those. Okay, so now you should have read through all of the requirements. All the information is provided here on page 170. The first 3 requirements are on this page, which are asking us to record the events in the general journal, post to the appropriate T accounts, and then add the costs of the unfinished chalet and show the total amount equals the ending balance in the work in process inventory account. On the next page, well, let's just work through those first. Let's just work through those first 3 first, and then we'll move on to the last 2 requirements after that. Okay, so requirement 1, recording of the journal entries. So most of this information is given to you. There's a few calculations, but not too many. First, raw materials inventory, accounts payable. It tells you that there were purchased materials on account. That's in part A there of $440,000. And then part B, the next journal entry here is recording your work in process inventory. So you are told here of the different chalets. Chalet 13, 14, 15, and 16 have direct labor involved at these costs right here. So those are going to go in your work in process inventory. This is just your direct labor piece. And then your manufacturing overhead is the question mark. And they tell you that the total of the direct and indirect labor is $114,000. They tell you that in part B of the information. So if you know that the total is 114, you can calculate your direct labor. Then your indirect, your manufacturing overhead piece is going to be the difference of $29,400. Okay, so we have effectively now moved that into our work in process inventory. Now we also need to move in our raw material inventory into our work in process inventory account. Again, this information is given to us in, looks like part C of direct materials. For each chalet 13 through 16 is given to us. We can add that up and we get $226,400. The equipment piece of $6,300, that is also given to us in part D of the information. The manufacturing overhead of $19,500 is given to us in these 2 pieces in part E. Equipment rentals and prepaid plant insurance that has expired, so both of those are given to us. So that's where that entry comes from. And then the manufacturing overhead piece for the work in process. Now they tell us that our allocated overhead to jobs is at the predetermined rate of 60% of our direct labor cost. Okay, so we already calculated our direct labor cost up here of $84,600. That was all of our direct labor pieces. So if we just take the 60% of our direct labor, that's where we get the $50,760. All right, we're still not quite done with part 1 here, requirement 1. We still have a few more entries here. So the finished goods inventory. So that is what was moved out of work in process and was completed. So the problem tells us in G, it tells us that the chalets completed were numbers 13, 15, and 16. So we can take each one of those chalets and individually find our complete costs for those that should be then transferred out of work in process and into finished goods. Those are now complete. So we will take the this, I believe, was our direct labor. Yes, this is our direct labor, our direct material, and then our overhead, which was 60% of direct labor. And you can verify those numbers either by looking back in your book, or you can look up here and see those numbers that were here, and our inventory here, and then of course the 60% of the direct labor is calculated. That gives us our total costs for each one of those jobs, with a total of $259,600. Okay, then in Part H, it tells us that the chalets sold on account were numbers 13 and number 16. They were sold on account. They tell us how much those were sold for, $97,000 and $146,000. On account, debit accounts receivable, and credit our sales revenue account. And then finally, we have cost of goods sold, of course, associated with these. These had previously, of course, been moved into our finished goods inventory up here. Remember, these that were moved in were numbers 13, 15, and 16. Now we have just sold 13 and 16. So we take the costs associated with those, which we identified down here already, and add those up, and $165,920 is the cost of goods sold associated with the sales of these units. So this is a good review of your financial accounting and some of the debit and credit entries that you did in there, but now you're actually calculating these numbers yourself. Okay, that is requirement 1. Now let's take a look at requirement 2. So that is asking us to just post into the T accounts and to determine the ending account balances, assuming that the beginning balances were 0. Okay, so work in process inventory, all we're doing is taking our journal entries and posting into our T account, if you also remember that from financial accounting, to come up with our ending balance and work in process inventory. Again, posting our entries for finished goods, which all I believe came from this page. Yes, right here and right here we only had 2 entries to come up with our ending numbers. Now we can verify these 2 numbers to make sure that those match what they should match. So remember, we put into finished goods inventory 15 and 16, and we sold 13 and 16, so this should be left with number 15, which we are. If you look at the $93,840, that's what's left in our account. I believe the analysis of that and the breakdown is below, and then we'll come back to the $102,000 here in just a moment. But let's take a look at that. Here's our direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, $93,840. Yes, that does equal our ending balance. And then our $102,000 work in process inventory. So that should be the unfinished chalet of number 14. Remember, we moved and completed 13, 15, and 16 into finished goods. Of the chalets that were given to us in this problem, the only one that was not completed was number 14. So that should be the only one left in our work in process inventory. And if we look at the direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead involved with that chalet, we see that yes, it should be 102,000, and it does match that number. So we have done that all correctly. The last requirement, requirement number 5, is just a very simple gross profit analysis on our 2 chalets that were sold to show our sales revenue minus our cost of goods sold and to get our gross profit. And that shows here how much our gross profit was on both of these chalets, a little more profitable on chalet number 16 in total dollars. And the last part of that requirement was asking us what costs must gross profit cover. So what costs must our gross profit cover. So what is not included in these numbers? What is left that needs to be covered by gross profit? Well, anything below the line, right? Your administration, customer service costs, design, distribution, marketing, research and development. Those are the types of expenses that would still need to be covered by your gross profit, and hopefully make a profit in the end there as well. That is the end of this particular problem. So again, good luck with your exam, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.